Imagine a scenario. You find yourself in a tense disagreement. Your heart races. Each word feels sharp. Every statement seems like a skirmish. You construct your next reply with care, intent on showing that you're correct, but the other party is doing just that as well. Neither of you is truly listening, merely biding your time to retaliate. And then Nietzsche enters the scene. He doesn't take sides, he doesn't instruct you on what to say. Rather, he quietly tells you something haunting. You have already lost. What does he mean by this? You're in conflict. You're defending your position. You're resolutely holding your stance. How can this signify failure? Because as Nietzsche asserts, the instant you engage in such a fight, you have relinquished your authority. Genuine strength, he contends, arises not from striving to be correct. It springs from something far more surprising. So, what is this concealed strength? And why does silence frequently convey more than spoken words? Let's delve into Nietzsche's philosophy and reveal the quiet tactic that grants you true power. Many individuals think that power stems from winning discussions, disproving others, and asserting dominance in dialogues, but Friedrich Nietzsche had an entirely different perspective. He believed that true power lay not in language, but in control. Why do people argue? If you've ever been involved in a passionate debate, you understand how swiftly temperatures can rise. Yet, have you taken a moment to ponder why arguments occur in the first place? Nietzsche would argue that most disagreements aren't about the truth, but stem from deeper psychological needs, specifically the protection of one's ego. People engage in arguments because they perceive their identity as threatened. Admitting they are wrong feels akin to losing a part of themselves, and the mind fights against this vigorously. Power disputes suggest that many discussions aren't anchored in facts or reasoning. They are fights for supremacy. Who maintains the final word, dictates the tone, or forces the opposition to yield? Group mentality and the search for social approval also play roles. Some argue not because they genuinely believe in their stance, but due to a desire to appear intelligent, confident, or strong to those around them. Nietzsche interpreted these behaviors as indicators of frailty. He posited that those who respond emotionally to debates are under the influence of others. The moment you allow someone to provoke you, you have already been defeated. Nietzsche's concept of will to power and the Übermensch is frequently misinterpreted. It's not about sheer aggression, it's about the capacity to assert your will on reality. This doesn't always necessitate spoken communication. Occasionally, the most significant strength is in the ability to remain calm, and this is where the Übermensch comes into play. In Nietzsche's philosophy, the Übermensch is the epitome of a superior individual who is not swayed by emotions like an average person. He doesn't engage in arguments solely to prove he's right. Instead, he discerns when to participate and when to remain quiet, as true power lies in controlling the entire exchange. Consider an example where two individuals are disputing during a meeting. One is loud and assertive, trying to prove their correctness. The other is calm and composed, listening more than they speak. They don't get involved in emotional exchanges, but when they do contribute, their words are powerful, timely, and change the direction of the dialogue. Who truly possesses the power here? Nietzsche would argue that the individual who maintains composure and doesn't react emotionally ultimately prevails. Why is intentional silence more effective than merely winning arguments? When used appropriately, silence is not a sign of weakness, it's a psychological advantage. It compels the other person to disclose more about themselves. It generates uncertainty, prompting them to reconsider their own statements. It introduces tension, which can make others uneasy, thereby granting you authority. The Übermensch not only refrains from talking during disputes, he employs silence strategically, using pauses and moments of restraint to deliver well-timed responses that shift the dialogue in his favor. This is the reason Nietzsche's notion of power isn't centered on fighting. It's about mastering the scenario before any confrontation occurs. Silence transcends the mere absence of speech. It is a method, a potent tool, wielded by some of history's most brilliant figures to excel in clashes of intellect, business, and warfare. Nietzsche's vision of power was not centered on loud confrontations or triumphing in debates. It focused on influence, control, and strategic restraint. Let's examine three iconic personalities who exemplified this principle: Socrates, Steve Jobs, and Miyamoto Musashi. Socrates employing a method that achieves victory without conflict. Socrates never participated in standard arguments. He didn't shout, attack, or impose his viewpoints. Rather, he utilized a technique so impactful that its influence can still be seen in intellectual discussions today. The Socratic method, a form of questioning designed to help individuals reveal their own inconsistencies. Imagine, in this scenario, an arrogant politician from Athens asserts that he is the most knowledgeable individual in the city. Rather than confronting him directly, Socrates asks a simple question: what is wisdom? The politician, keen to demonstrate his intelligence, starts to explain. However, each time Socrates poses a question, the explanation begins to crumble. The once self-assured politician now stutters, coming to the realization that he lacks a genuine understanding of the very term he proudly proclaims. Socrates didn't need to outright declare others were mistaken. He made them come to that realization on their own. He recognized a crucial fact: people do not readily accept what they are told. They embrace what they uncover independently. This idea captures the core of unspoken influence. Rather than getting involved in futile arguments, one should ask questions that prompt self-reflection, a tactic similar to Steve Jobs' method of strategic conflict management. Whereas Socrates used questioning to assert dominance, Steve Jobs excelled at persuasion. He didn't shy away from disagreements, instead he orchestrated them. His leadership at Apple centered on guiding the broader dialogue rather than squabbling over trivial matters. Jobs adhered to a straightforward yet impactful tenet: avoid wasting effort on trivial conflicts, but when something is genuinely significant, commit fully. A well-known instance illustrates this when he clashed with his team regarding the design of the iPhone. The engineers favored physical buttons while Jobs desired a completely touchscreen interface. Rather than engaging in prolonged disputes, he steered them toward his vision. He allowed discussions, letting them voice their reservations until they eventually recognized, through his mentorship, that a touchscreen device was not only feasible but unavoidable. He didn't impose his thoughts on others. He led them to believe it was their own idea. Many argue from a place of pride, trying to showcase their correctness, but Jobs argued with intention, aiming to convert others rather than merely to make a case. This distinction is crucial. If your statements do not inspire action, they are simply noise. Miyamoto Musashi, the quiet samurai, won battles before they even began. Now let's shift from philosophy and entrepreneurship to the battlefield. Musashi, the undefeated swordsman, comprehended a fundamental principle: the optimal way to win a confrontation is to avoid drawing your sword. He triumphed in over 60 duels, not solely via physical prowess, but primarily through psychological strategy. He engaged in mind games, unsettling his adversaries even before the fight commenced. A notable instance was his duel with Sasaki Kojiro, a renowned swordsman famed for his swift attacks. Instead of confronting him directly, Musashi arrived several hours late, infuriating Kojiro. By the time they engaged, Kojiro's rage clouded his judgment, leading him to make errors that enabled Musashi to easily secure the win. Musashi recognized that emotional opponents are inherently vulnerable. This aligns perfectly with Nietzsche's philosophy. The Übermensch does not react spontaneously but manages the responses of others. Musashi demonstrated that silence, patience, and psychological superiority can often be more effective than sheer strength. The unifying factor here is the power of strategic silence. What connects Socrates, Steve Jobs, and Musashi? They never expended energy on meaningless disputes. They refrained from reactive behavior, setting the agenda for interactions. They recognized that genuine strength lies not in spoken words, but in influence. The next time you feel compelled to argue, think about whether you are reacting emotionally or managing the circumstances. True strength is characterized by silence. Why do we engage in arguments? What drives us to prove our correctness, defend our ideas, or fight back, even when discussions seem fruitless? Many individuals mistakenly think arguments are about uncovering the truth. In reality, they revolve around influence. The more one argues, the more they expose personal insecurities, emotional triggers, and the undeniable fact that another person is shaping their reactions. Nietzsche grasped this profoundly. His idea of the will to power encompassed not only physical control, but also mastering oneself to the extent that others unwittingly fall under one's sway. Modern psychology corroborates Nietzsche's insights. Why do individuals become ensnared in arguments? Arguments are not based on logic. They are rooted in psychology. When we engage in disputes, we think we are defending our beliefs, yet we often react based on deep-seated psychological responses. To understand this, let's look at cognitive biases. Our brains seek victory instead of knowledge. They are hardwired with biases that hinder rational argumentation. The main offenders include confirmation bias, where we only seek information that aligns with our pre-existing beliefs, and the backfire effect, which occurs when our beliefs are challenged, leading us to remain steadfast rather than change our perspectives. Minds, we intensify the Dunning-Kruger effect. The less we understand about a topic, the more assured we become in our beliefs. These biases render most discussions futile. Individuals rarely listen. Instead, they simply wait for an opportunity to share their own views. Nietzsche's Übermensch sidesteps this pitfall. He pays attention, observes, and determines whether the discussion is worth participating in. 2 emotional triggers. Why do we take disagreements so personally? Have you ever thought about why certain debates infuriate you while others leave you unaffected? This happens because our arguments aren't based on reason. They're rooted in our personal identities. When someone counters our opinions at a fundamental level, it feels like an affront to who we are. That's why discussions around politics, religion, or philosophy can escalate quickly. It's not just ideas being criticized, but the individuals themselves feel under attack. This is why history's most influential figures rarely engage in emotionally charged debates. If someone can provoke you emotionally, they gain power over you. The Übermensch avoids falling into this snare. He remains composed, assesses the situation, and then chooses whether to reply. 3. The quest for affirmation. The underlying cause of conflicts is that people seek validation. At the foundation of many disputes lies something other than truth. It is, in fact, our ego. Individuals are not merely seeking to prove they are correct. They desire to be recognized as correct by others. Nietzsche recognized that many people look for affirmation from the majority. They engage in arguments not to uncover the truth but to earn approval. However, the Übermensch does not rely on external approval. He establishes his own reality. Consider the most impactful individuals throughout history. Did they squander their time arguing with naysayers? No, they concentrated on their goals, disregarded interruptions, and allowed their deeds to convey more than their words could. Nietzsche was visionary for his era. His thoughts on authority, dominance, and silence resonate remarkably well with contemporary psychological studies. So let's explore this further. 1. The influence of power in social exchanges. Social psychologists have discovered that the individuals who hold the most influence in any gathering are often not the most talkative, but rather those who direct the conversation. They do not interrupt or provide excessive explanations. They carefully select their words, ensuring that others pay close attention to every statement. This explains why influential leaders seldom raise their voices. They do not require volume. When they speak, others listen because they have established a presence of authority through their calm demeanor. 2. The significance of self-control in influencing others. Studies in behavioral psychology indicate that those who maintain their poise during disagreements are significantly more convincing than those who become emotional. Why is this? Humans have a natural tendency to associate calmness with confidence. Nietzsche argued that true strength derives from mastering oneself. The Übermensch does not succumb to emotions. Instead of reacting, he makes conscious decisions, which renders him invulnerable. Nietzsche regarded silence as a form of power, not because he advocated for avoiding confrontations, but because he understood that the person who governs their own responses steers the entire discussion. To put this in perspective, If someone insults you and you respond immediately, you have given up your power. If someone provokes you and you feel the need to defend yourself, you have surrendered. If you become embroiled in a debate just to assert your correctness, you have also lost. However, if you watch, remain composed, and only engage when it aligns with your objectives, you have already triumphed. Nietzsche's philosophy isn't about perpetual silence. It involves selecting your battles wisely. Ask yourself, am I speaking out of desire or obligation? Am I reacting out of emotion, or am I in charge of my reply? Is this dispute deserving of my effort, or am I simply catering to my own ego? Because true strength, according to Nietzsche, is found not in the words spoken, but in the silence preceding them, the pause that prompts others to lean in, and the choice to speak solely at crucial moments, which is the quiet strategy that grants you influence. Silence holds great strength, but does that imply you should always remain silent? Silence can serve as a powerful tool, yet using it carelessly can be just as unwise as speaking thoughtlessly. If silence was the exclusive route to power, then the most significant thinkers throughout history, philosophers, revolutionaries, and visionaries, would have gone unheard. Instead, they chose to speak out. This is because genuine power lies not in shunning conflict, but in understanding when to engage and when to step back. Nietzsche's concept of the will to power frames conflict as a means toward mastery. Many misunderstand Nietzsche as promoting retreat or detachment from struggles. However, his notion of the will to power was never about being passive. It was focused on conquest, personal growth, and overcoming obstacles. Power is not derived solely from silence, it entails control and mastery. Avoiding conflict entirely is not a sign of wisdom, it's merely fear masked as restraint. Handling conflict effectively doesn't mean turning away from it. It involves leveraging it as a means for growth. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch indicates that while he avoids trivial disputes, he is also not afraid to confront necessary challenges. He recognizes that conflict can forge strength. So, why do people typically shy away from disagreements? Because they often feel uneasy. However, Nietzsche realized that discomfort can lead to strength. He viewed hardship as vital rather than something to flee from. Those with weak minds tend to shun obstacles, while stronger minds embrace them, as these challenges refine thinking. Picture a warrior who never engages in battle. A sword that isn't tested in combat will not be battle-ready. Similarly, an untested mind remains dull, weak, and fragile. Without intellectual conflict, your concepts stay unproven, and without struggle, your beliefs lack substance. Reflect on the boldest thinkers throughout history. Galileo faced condemnation for opposing the Church's perspective on the cosmos. Socrates received a death sentence for scrutinizing established beliefs. Nietzsche himself was labeled insane during his lifetime, but today his thoughts significantly impact contemporary philosophy. Their influence stemmed not from silence, but from wisely choosing their conflicts and engaging in essential debates. A crucial distinction exists between arguing to assert correctness and arguing to influence reality, a truth that Nietzsche grasped well. Prominent leaders, thinkers, and visionaries do not shy away from disputes. They employ them strategically. For instance, Socrates didn't directly assault the beliefs of others, but rather questioned them until they faltered. Nietzsche's writings aim to challenge and provoke, shaking individuals out of their complacency. Steve Jobs didn't steer clear of conflict. Instead, he harnessed it to encourage others to transcend their limits and inspire innovation. Influential individuals do not seek arguments for affirmation. They engage for transformation. They don't compete for victory in debates. They strive to reshape the world and realize their vision. The Übermensch argues not for ego satisfaction, but with a clear purpose. Engage in a discussion when it sharpens your intellect, uncovers deeper truths, propels growth, or alters the balance of power in your favor. Conversely, avoid engagement when it's merely defending your ego, dealing with someone closed to change, participating in an unproductive emotional clash, or when your quietude itself serves as a power play. Engaging in arguments without strategy reflects weakness, while arguing thoughtfully showcases strength. Nietzsche welcomed disputes, but on his own conditions. If a disagreement weakens you, sidestep it. If it fortifies you, get involved. If it merely distracts you, disregard it entirely. If conflict empowers you, it's not something to shy away from. It's something to master. True strength isn't only found in silence, but in discerning when to voice your thoughts and when to remain quiet. Given the option to never argue again or to master the skill of influencing through conflict, which would enhance your power more? Imagine awakening one day to a voice telling you that you have only 100 words left to speak in your lifetime. Every single word would then hold significance. Would you squander them in a fierce argument? Would you use them attempting to validate yourself to someone who isn't paying attention? Or would you choose them judiciously, like a warrior honing his ultimate weapon before a fight? Genuine power exists here. Nietzsche recognized a truth that many overlook. Words are a form of currency. The more carelessly you expend them, the less valuable they become. Now envision yourself in a debate. Your heart races, your mind is flooded with responses and defenses. You're eager to prove a point, but stop. Take a breath. Consider who truly possesses power in this exchange. The one desperately trying to assert themselves, or the one who understands when to maintain silence? Remember, silence is not a sign of weakness. It's a tactical approach, a form of control. It's the skill of making others question themselves without you needing to persuade them actively. Now, here's the challenge. The next time you feel the urge to argue, pause instead of reacting impulsively. Observe. Notice how the other person reveals their vulnerabilities. Observe how their words disclose their anxieties and insecurities. Then, when the moment is right, choose your words like a master or opt for silence, as true power lies in quietude. For more insights on philosophy, psychology, and power, click subscribe and activate the notification bell, ensuring you never miss an exploration into the ideas that influence how we think and live. Stay sharp and stay powerful.